What if the main reason you haven't reached your full potential isn't a lack of discipline, but a hidden part of yourself that benefits from keeping you stuck? This idea can feel unsettling because most of us were taught to blame external factors, time, luck, other people, or motivation. Yet, Jung would suggest that the strongest chains are often internal and they rarely look like chains at all. They appear as your personality, sound like your common sense, and feel like your usual coping mechanisms. The shadow is the part of you that learned to hide certain truths in order to be accepted, to feel safe, to be loved, or simply to survive. It's not just the dark side, it's the unseen side. It is like a room in the house of your psyche that remained locked for years, quietly influencing everything you do. In 2026, the world may tempt you to push harder, hustle louder, and force results purely with willpower. But if the shadow is in charge, working harder can leave you more exhausted, anxious, and frustrated because you're trying to build a new life on top of old protective habits. You can set ambitious goals while your unconscious mind pulls you back into familiar patterns. You can crave love yet make choices that drain you. You can desire peace and still recreate tension because it feels familiar. You can want success and yet hesitate just before being visible because exposure feels unsafe. This explains why you can be smart, capable, and sincere, yet feel like something invisible sabotages you at critical moments. Jung called this being possessed by unconscious patterns. The tricky part is that the shadow does not announce itself as a villain. It wears masks that appear responsible, loyal, kind, realistic, or just how I am. It can show up as overthinking that sounds like wisdom, overgiving that feels like love, self-criticism framed as improvement, control disguised as strength, or delay presented as careful planning. Beneath each behavior lies a hidden question: what am I avoiding, feeling, risking, or facing? This video isn't meant to shame you, it's meant to free you. When you can identify these archetypes, you stop being unconsciously driven by them. You stop confusing survival strategies with personality. You start consciously choosing your life rather than acting out of reflex. In the next sections, we will reveal 5 shadow archetypes that seem normal on the surface, but quietly steal your confidence, distort your relationships, and block your future. Recognizing yourself in these patterns will not make you feel cursed, it will bring clarity. The first archetype appears harmless, even reasonable, yet it can steal entire years of your life. Have you noticed how procrastination rarely feels like sabotage? It often feels smart, or like you are waiting for the perfect moment. It whispers softly, "Not today." It seems harmless, even mature, even responsible. But this is exactly how procrastination steals your future. It delays your life under the guise of comfort, continually moving the starting line so you never face the uneasy edge of growth. Jung would say this is not mere laziness. It is a protective strategy of the psyche. It is your ego avoiding shame, judgment, and the chance of discovering limits. It is the part of you that prefers remaining a potential masterpiece rather than risking being a real human who takes action. In everyday life, procrastination does not always show up as lounging on the couch. For many adults, especially those who have carried responsibility for years, it appears as endless planning, researching, and preparing. You watch one more video, take another course, buy a notebook, organize your calendar, make a list, and feel a fleeting sense of progress. But the deeper truth is that relief comes from avoiding exposure. Procrastination does not protect your dreams, it shields your ego from embarrassment. Once you truly begin, you become visible to reality. The fantasy of one day no longer hides you. Consider the quiet ways this steals years. The project you endlessly rewrite in your mind but never publish. The business idea you polish but never launch. The resume you keep saving for later while remaining in a job that slowly drains your spirit. The hard conversation you postpone until resentment becomes routine. The doctor appointment you avoid because it forces you to admit vulnerability. The boundary with family you fear setting because it might appear selfish. Procrastination can even masquerade as loyalty. I will put everyone else first. But underneath lies a common unspoken fear. If I try and fail, what will that say about me? Jung might call this a shadow bargain, trading short-term comfort for long-term loss, while your unconscious collects interest. Each delay doesn't just postpone results, it trains your nervous system to link action with danger. It teaches that your desires are optional and your life can wait. Here is a truth many resist admitting. Sometimes you are not afraid of failing. You are afraid of succeeding. Success brings exposure, expectations, and the risk of envy, criticism, or abandonment. If you grew up in a setting where being seen felt unsafe, procrastination becomes a quiet bodyguard. It keeps you small, nearly ready, so you avoid judgment. Healing begins when you recognize this clearly. You don't need to force yourself with harsh discipline. You need honesty. The procrastinator is not your enemy, it is a frightened protector within you. It believes that delay equals safety. Instead of fighting it with shame, you outgrow it with small proofs. Show yourself that action does not equal humiliation, imperfection does not mean rejection, and the first step is survivable. Take quick action. Choose one task you've been avoiding and do only the first step today, not the whole task. Open the document and write a single sentence. Send the message you've been rehearsing. Put on your shoes and walk for 5 minutes. Make the appointment even if you feel unready. The goal isn't to conquer the entire day, it's to break the spell of delay. The spell thrives on the fantasy that readiness comes before movement. In reality, readiness is born through movement. Now, share in the comments, what is your procrastinator's favorite excuse? And what first step will you take today? Because the moment you try to move forward, the next shadow often appears immediately. What if the voice you call high standards is actually an old wound dressed up as discipline? The inner critic rarely introduces itself as harshness. It presents as realism, humility, responsibility, or maturity. It sounds like control, like being careful, like doing the right thing. Yet Jung would describe this voice as a shadow figure, a strict internal authority shaped by past shame. It is the part of you that learned that love was conditional, mistakes were punished, and being seen was risky. Its way of protecting you is by keeping you small. The problem is that you often trust this voice more than you trust your own life. In reality, the inner critic does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It sits with you as you write an email, making you revise the same line multiple times until your own voice fades. It hovers as you look in the mirror, convincing you that your worth is a problem to fix. It observes others succeed and uses that success as proof that you are behind. It follows you into quiet moments, replaying past conversations like a courtroom, finding new ways to assign blame. It makes you second-guess decisions, not out of caution, but out of fear of being wrong. Above all, it makes you quit early, not from lack of ability, but because quitting feels safe. If you stop first, no one can reject you. If you hide first, no one can hurt you. This is the secret logic of the inner critic. Jung would call this an inner complex, a cluster of emotions and beliefs that takes control of your psyche. The inner critic often develops in environments where you had to perform to stay safe. Maybe you grew up under constant evaluation. Maybe you were praised only when you achieved. Maybe sensitivity was mocked. Maybe comparisons were used as motivation. Maybe mistakes were treated as flaws of character. In those conditions, the mind learns a strict rule: if I attack myself first, I can prevent others from attacking me. You internalize this voice and carry it into adulthood, living as if judgment is always present, even when it isn't. Here is how it steals your best life. You want to start something meaningful, but the critic says, "Who do you think you are?" You want to speak honestly, but it says, "You are too much." You want a break, but it says, "You don't deserve it." You want to try again, but it says, "You always fail." The critic does not make you better, it makes you smaller. It drains your energy through overthinking, fractures your confidence through comparison, and trains you to mistake cruelty for improvement. Healing begins when you recognize the difference between guidance and shame. Guidance is clear and kind. Shame is vague and violent. Guidance says, "Let's learn." Shame says, "You are wrong." The first step is not silencing the critic by force, it is naming it. What remains unnamed remains in control. When a critical thought appears, identify it. This is my inner critic. Then respond with a single calm truth. I can improve without cruelty. This is not a simple affirmation. It is a boundary, a refusal to let shame dictate your life. For deeper work, the exercises in parts 4, 5, and 6 help trace the critic's origin, reveal what it is protecting, and replace it with a wiser inner authority. The goal is not flawless confidence. The goal is a self that does not abandon you when you feel imperfect. Now reflect. When does your inner critic speak the loudest? When you begin, when you are visible, or when you rest? And whose voice does it echo? When shame becomes the language of your daily life, you start seeking safety through approval rather than trust in yourself. What if your exhaustion isn't caused by your schedule, but by quietly betraying yourself in small ways throughout the day? Being a people-pleaser isn't a flaw, it's a survival strategy that once kept you safe. At some point, your nervous system learned that harmony brings safety, that being agreeable brings belonging, and that being needed brings value. So you became skilled at reading situations, easing tension, anticipating expectations, and saying yes before anyone even asked. For a while, this worked. It prevented conflict, kept people close, and made you appear good. But now, this pattern is costing something vital: your self-respect. In everyday life, a people-pleaser rarely seems dramatic. They appear polite, responsible, and considerate. It looks like answering messages when you're drained to avoid seeming rude. It looks like agreeing to one more favor even when your body says no. It looks like taking on extra work to avoid disappointing a boss while lying awake with tension in your chest. It looks like smiling through family gatherings while feeling knots in your stomach, afraid that one honest boundary will make you the bad person. Sometimes it even looks like being the strong one for everyone while quietly resenting that no one asks what you need. The people-pleaser keeps relationships moving but leaves their inner life empty. You can be surrounded by others and still feel unseen because you are meeting their needs, not your own. You are maintaining comfort for others. Jung would say, the people-pleaser is often a persona, a social mask built for acceptance, and behind it hides a shadow fear: if I disappoint them, I will be abandoned. That's why overgiving feels urgent. It isn't generosity, it's panic wrapped in kindness. Because this persona is familiar, it can become mistaken for your identity. You start believing you are lovable only when useful, safe only when agreeable, valuable only when needed. But the psyche cannot thrive in a life where existence must be earned. Eventually, something inside will rebel through exhaustion, irritability, numbness, or quiet sadness, not because you are broken, but because yourself is trying to wake you up. Here's the hopeful truth: this pattern can evolve. It can become your turning point, not by becoming harsh, cold, or selfish, but by embracing honesty. One clear boundary is not rejection, it is clarity. And clarity is healing. The moment you say one honest no, you start rebuilding your inner strength. You stop negotiating with your limits, stop offering yourself as a peace treaty, and stop paying for connection with exhaustion. When you do this, something shifts. People who truly respect you adjust. Those who only benefited from your overgiving resist. That resistance doesn't mean you're wrong. It means the rules are changing. Ask yourself gently, where in your life are you being nice when you really need to be true? Where do you feel quiet resentment after saying yes? Where does your body tighten, your shoulders rise, your breath shorten? Yet you keep performing agreement as if it's your duty. If you stopped earning love through exhaustion, what space would open for you to feel, create, and heal? Practical exercise, the boundary inventory. Write down 3 situations where you say yes but feel drained afterward. For each situation, ask, what am I afraid will happen if I say no? What do I need instead? Write 1 clear boundary sentence for each. I cannot do that right now. I am not available. Or, I need time to think before answering. Practice saying each sentence out loud once so your nervous system learns that honesty is safe. Use 1 boundary sentence in a real situation within the next 48 hours. Even if your voice shakes, you feel guilty, or your mind tries to talk you out of it. The goal isn't fearlessness, it's acting with self-respect. Share in the comments which boundary sentence feels hardest for you, and who do you fear disappointing most. When you stop overgiving, you may uncover the next shadow, the story that says you have no power. What changes in your life when you stop seeing yourself as someone who life happened to, and start seeing yourself as someone life is asking to awaken? The story of being a victim is not foolish, nor is it a sign of weakness. For many, it began as a truthful record of pain. There were periods when you truly had no power. You were a child in a home where your feelings were ignored. You were in a relationship where you had to shrink yourself to survive. You were in a job where your efforts went unnoticed. You faced health or financial crises that shook your entire nervous system. When choices were limited, your psyche did what it needed to do. It protected you. It did so by lowering your hope when hope felt risky. It gave meaning to your suffering in ways that made sense. This is just my life. That story may have helped you endure the past, but if it becomes your identity as an adult, it turns into a prison with a familiar name on the door. In reality, the victim pattern rarely appears as obvious victimhood. It often presents itself as realism, a chronic complaint that never becomes action. It sounds like, people like me don't get breaks, or I already tried, nothing changes, or what's the point? It shows up as waiting for someone else to finally understand you, choose you, rescue you, or give you permission to start. It appears when you repeatedly tell the same story about your past without letting it evolve into wisdom. It manifests when you blame fate, timing, age, or personality, quietly stopping your efforts, not out of laziness, but because trying feels like opening yourself to disappointment again. The victim's story feels safe because it removes responsibility. At first, that can feel relieving, but it also removes power. Life becomes something that happens to you instead of something you can shape. Jung would call this being possessed by an archetype, not a moral failure, but a psychic pattern dominating your perception. When this archetype possesses you, you fail to see the real options available. You overlook small opportunities, stop trusting subtle shifts, and ignore the voice of your deeper self, a center that does not deny pain but refuses to glorify it. The victim pattern keeps you attached to the wound and expects the world to repair what only your inner authority can transform. That is why it is so seductive. It offers explanation without asking for risk. But healing always requires one risk, a single honest step that proves you are more than the product of your past. Here is the hard but free in truth. The victim archetype survives through repetition. You repeat the same sentence, complaint, or hopeless conclusion because repetition creates a trance. In that trance, you avoid confronting the grief of what you lost or the fear of what you desire. The moment you admit you still want something, you also admit you may need to fight for it, be seen, face rejection, and grow beyond familiar suffering. The real conflict beneath victimhood is not weakness, it is fear of hope. Consider this: what if the danger of your victim story is not that it's false, but that it's incomplete? What if it's only the first chapter, yet you keep calling it the ending? What if your pain was never meant to prove you are doomed, but to initiate a deeper kind of power, the power to respond, choose, and move forward even while afraid? Think of one area of your life where you've been waiting, not for the right time, but for the right feeling, the feeling that guarantees no failure. To reclaim practical power, start small first. Write one sentence you often say when you feel stuck, e.g., "Nothing ever works for me." Then, write the feeling underneath it, "I failed." Next, rewrite the sentence as a choice you can make today. "I will take one small step today by today." Choose one action that takes less than 10 minutes, send one email, clean a small area, walk for 10 minutes, apply for one job, or say one honest sentence. Take that action within 1 hour so your psyche receives immediate proof, not another promise. Finally, write, "I have power now." Share in the comments what is the sentence you say when you feel stuck, and what is the one small step you can take today to break the trance. After helplessness, control often becomes the next addiction, and this simple exercise is the first step to reclaim it. What if what you call being responsible is actually your nervous system asking for certainty because it doesn't trust life to support you? The controller archetype often appears impressive on the outside. You plan ahead, cover every detail, keep the household running, maintain family stability, and keep the team on track. People rely on you. You rarely break down publicly, but inside it can feel like carrying permanent tension in your shoulders, as if your breath never fully reaches your lungs. In everyday life, control shows up in small habits: checking your phone too often for updates, rewriting the same plan multiple times, over-preparing for conversations, and feeling annoyed when others are relaxed. It's the need for everyone else to be okay, so you can finally exhale. It looks like strength, but often it's fear dressed up as competence. Jung would say the controller isn't bad, it's a protective part formed when chaos taught you lessons. If nothing is managed, something might break. Maybe you grew up around unpredictability, mood swings, financial stress, or emotional neglect, learning that vigilance equals love. Or maybe adulthood taught you that safety comes only through productivity, worth only through usefulness, and respect only through having answers. The controller isn't your enemy, it's your younger self trying to shield your heart. But in 2026, that protective wall can evolve into something healthier. Control can become a calm inner structure. That means setting clear priorities instead of chasing perfection. It means routines that nurture, not rituals that trap. It means emotional regulation without obsession. Here, you keep your ambition while reclaiming peace. Here's the empowering insight. The strongest people aren't those who control everything. They are the ones who can face uncertainty without losing themselves. They hold plans loosely. They move forward without guarantees. They allow others to be disappointed without collapsing into guilt. This is not laziness, it is inner authority. It is the self guiding the psyche rather than fear driving the wheel. Ask yourself, where in your life are you holding so tightly that you can't receive anything new? And if you let go for just 10 minutes, what might you finally feel? Not as a problem to fix, but as a truth to notice. Here is a practical exercise to release control. Time required 14 minutes. Write down one situation you are trying to control. Draw 2 columns. Column A, what I can control today. Column B, what I cannot control today. Fill in at least 3 items in each column. Choose one item from column A and take action on it today. Choose one item from column B and practice a release phrase. I cannot control this, but I can control my next step. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Sit quietly, no phone, no fixing, no planning. After 5 minutes, write one line describing what you feel when you stop controlling. Now you are ready for the true Jungian wind integration, not self-criticism. Your shadow archetypes are not a sign that something is wrong with you. They are proof that you adapted. At some point in your life, each of these parts appeared like a protective guardian in the dark. The procrastinator slowed you down to prevent humiliation. The inner critic aimed to keep you acceptable so rejection would not hurt. The people pleaser learned to maintain peace so conflict wouldn't cost you love. The victim's story shielded you from overwhelming responsibility when it felt too heavy. The controller built walls because chaos had once caused pain. None of these parts is harmful, they are loyal though outdated. In 2026, what once kept you safe may now be what limits your growth and holds you back from your best life. Jung's path is not about self-criticism. It is about integration. Integration is the moment your hidden parts stop steering in the dark and you take the wheel. The procrastinator transforms into deliberate pacing, allowing you to start small without needing perfection. The critic becomes discernment, helping you improve without harshness. The people pleaser becomes healthy love, showing you that love that costs your self-respect is not true love. The victim evolves into responsibility as power returns the moment you commit to one small step. The controller becomes grounded structure, freeing you from constantly tensing your body to feel secure. The real success is this: your best life is not created by forcing a new personality. It is built by accepting the parts of yourself formed in survival and giving them a new purpose aligned with truth. Tonight, ask yourself one honest question: which shadow archetype has been running your life? And what new role could it take if you approached it with compassion and discipline? If this resonates with you, comment on the archetype you are ready to transform first and the single action you will take in the next 24 hours to make it real.